Working the night shift at Quickmart wasn't exactly my dream job, but after nearly 3 years, I'd gotten used to the rhythm. Same Oregon town, same routine, same coffee machine that never worked quite right. I clocked in at 4 p.m. and clocked out at midnight. The store was small, just off Route 26, surrounded by pine trees and silence. By the time 11:30 rolled around, most people were home. The customers we did get were either road-weary drivers or locals grabbing last-minute snacks, diapers, or six-packs. Predictable, peaceful. I liked it that way. That's what made Rick stand out. He came in for the first time last October. Middle-aged, maybe 50, with a shaved head and a gray hoodie zipped halfway up. He had one of those quiet smiles, thin, deliberate, like he'd practiced it in the mirror. He didn't buy much, just a couple of frozen burritos and a six-pack of Miller Lite. He paid in cash, exact change, and made small talk while I rang him up. "Man, I always come in during your shift," he said, voice low and gravelly. "You guys close at midnight, right?" It threw me for a second. I couldn't place his face, and something about the way he said it made my skin tighten. Yeah," I said with a polite chuckle. "Same schedule every week?" He nodded, still smiling, like that confirmed something for him. Then he took his bag and walked out into the dark. Didn't think much of it, not at first, but then he came back, and came back again, always around 11:45. Always the same lane, always that long knowing smile. A few days later, he dropped another comment. "Busy night?" he asked, placing a microwave dinner and a bottle of water on the counter. "Not really," I said, scanning the items. "Yeah, I figured. I mean, I know your schedule and all." My hands paused mid-scan. "Oh yeah?" I said, keeping my tone light. "You're on Monday to Friday, right? 4 to midnight. Take your break around 9:30. Usually grab a coffee from that busted machine near aisle 5. Then you go out the side door by the employee lot." He said it like he was reading from a list he'd memorized. I smiled tightly, trying to laugh, but my gut twisted. I'd never told him any of that. Hell, I wasn't even sure I'd told my manager what time I took my breaks. That night, after my shift, I walked out with my keys clenched in my fist. The parking lot was empty except for my old Toyota, parked in its usual corner spot, away from the other cars. I liked it that way, less chance of someone parking too close, easier exit. That night, it felt exposed. The next shift, I parked in a different spot, closer to the store, closer to the lights. At 11:30 p.m., Rick showed up again. He didn't say much, just bought gum and a soda. But as I handed him his receipt, he smiled wider than usual and said, "Switched parking spots." I froze. Didn't respond. He took his things and walked out like it was nothing. That was the moment I knew it wasn't in my head. I waited until my shift ended, then walked straight to Dave, our night security guard. Dave was in his 60s, ex-army. Didn't joke much, but when I told him everything, Rick's comments, how he knew my schedule, the parking thing, his expression turned hard. "Let's check the footage," he said, already moving toward the back office. We rewound to the last few nights. There he was, Rick, clear as day, always checking out near midnight, always walking outside afterward. But he didn't leave. He stood in the lot, not on his phone, not smoking, just stood there, watching the store. 15-20 minutes at a time. Dave leaned forward, staring at the screen. "He's casing you," he muttered, "or worse." The next night I couldn't concentrate. I double-checked every shadow, every creak. I jumped every time the doors chimed, but Rick didn't show up. At least, that's what I thought. Around 11:55, I took the last trash bag out to the dumpster behind the store. The cold hit me like a slap. I stepped outside, breathing through my nose, focused on getting it done quick. Then I saw him. Rick was standing in the far corner of the parking lot, not moving, not speaking, just watching. No smile this time, no wave, just blank, cold stillness. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on him, then turned and walked fast, almost ran back inside. Told Dave. He walked me to my car that night, flashlight in one hand, hand on his belt like he was ready for anything. Rick didn't follow. Didn't move, just stood there in the dark like a statue. That was the last time I saw him. Or so I thought. A week later, I was driving home after another shift. I'd finally started to relax again, telling myself it was over, that maybe he'd gotten bored, maybe the police patrols scared him off. Then I saw the headlights. Far back, not tailgating, not speeding, just there, steady, quiet. I switched lanes, so did the car. I took an exit I never used, into a residential neighborhood. The car followed. My hands started to sweat. I turned again. So did he. Finally, I pulled into a gas station with bright lights and security cameras. Parked right by the door. Sat there, pretending to scroll through my phone. The car slowed, then rolled past. Didn't stop. Didn't turn around. Just disappeared into the night. I waited 5 more minutes before I pulled back onto the road, taking a different route home. The next morning, I went straight to the local police department and filed a report. Gave them Rick's description, the security footage, the details. They said they'd increase patrols around closing time, just in case. Rick never came back, not once. Maybe he saw the police. Maybe he decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Or maybe he found someone else. I still work nights sometimes, picking up extra shifts, and I still check the corners of the lot before walking to my car. I keep pepper spray in my jacket and a tire iron under the driver's seat, but every now and then, when the store is quiet and the clock creeps past 11:45, I get that feeling again. Like someone's watching me. Like I'm not alone. Like Rick never really left. After what happened with Rick, I started thinking a lot about how easily routines can turn into vulnerabilities, how being predictable can get you noticed by people who have no business noticing you. I didn't tell many people what happened, not in full, just said I had a weird experience on the night shift and left it at that. But it stuck with me, the idea that someone could be watching you for weeks, months even, and you'd never know until it's too late. I started reading stories, watching videos, listening to podcasts with titles like Real Horror from Real Night Workers and Creeps in the Dark. And that's how I came across Charlene's story. She never told it publicly, but someone close to her, someone she trusted, shared the details with a podcast host who was interviewing night shift workers in Pittsburgh. And when I heard it, I couldn't stop thinking about it, because what happened to her was different from what happened to me. But it was also the same. It started with silence. Stillness. A feeling that something wasn't quite right. Then came the moment she couldn't explain. And after that, nothing ever felt normal again. My name is Charlene Yu. I'm 34 years old, and for 7 years I worked as a funeral director and overnight prep technician at a small family-owned funeral home just outside of Pittsburgh. I was good at my job. It wasn't glamorous, but it was important. There's a certain peace to working among the dead. They don't rush you, they don't complain, and they don't judge. That's what I used to say, anyway. My nights were quiet. I prepped the bodies, set up the viewing rooms for morning services, made sure everything was clean and respectful. The funeral home was a modest building with 2 main halls, an office, a break room, and an embalming suite in the back. Most nights, I was alone. Didn't bother me, at least, not until that January night. It was one of those bitter Pittsburgh nights when the cold doesn't feel like air, it feels like weight. I remember the way the wind sounded outside. It rattled the doors a little. I had just finished setting up the first floor viewing room for a morning service. The casket was polished, floral arrangements placed, soft lighting adjusted just right. I turned to head back toward the office when I saw him. A tall man in a black suit, standing completely still on the far side of the viewing room, hands at his sides, eyes fixed on the closed casket. My first thought was that he was a relative of the deceased, that maybe the family had arranged for him to visit privately, though I had no memory of that being scheduled. "Excuse me," I said, stepping slightly into the room. "The service isn't until tomorrow morning." No reaction. He didn't turn, didn't speak, didn't even move. Something about how still he was, unnaturally still, started to claw at the back of my neck. People shift their weight, they blink, they breathe. He did none of that. Then the phone rang, the main office line. Just for a second, I turned my head to glance back, and when I looked again, he was gone. The room was empty, no footsteps, no creak of floorboards, nothing. I checked the hallway, the front door, the break room, all locked, no one there. I told myself I must have imagined it. Stress, lack of sleep. I was working too many nights in a row. Still, I couldn't shake the image of him just standing there, watching the casket like he was waiting for something. I finished my shift, but I didn't feel calm. That kind of unease doesn't fade quickly. The next day I told myself not to be ridiculous, but when I returned that evening, the funeral home felt different, colder, tighter, the shadows longer. Every creak seemed to echo. At 10:45 p.m., I went to lock up. As I passed by the embalming room, I saw something that stopped me dead. A reflection, movement, in the window pane on the office door. I turned immediately, heart racing. No one. The room was empty, but when I turned back to the window, he was still there, his reflection, standing directly behind me, even though the space behind me was completely clear. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I backed away from the door and sat in the break room for almost 20 minutes, staring at the floor, waiting for my breath to come back. I told myself I was losing it, that I was seeing things, but I knew better. Something was wrong. And yet I came back. The next night. I don't know why. Maybe because I wanted to believe I was in control. Maybe because walking away felt like admitting I was scared. And I didn't want to be scared. I made it through most of the night without incident. I moved quickly, avoided mirrors, avoided that window. But right around 11:30, I went to grab my coat and shut down the lights. And that's when I heard it, a soft click, like a door unlocking. I turned toward the viewing room, the one I'd prepped 2 nights earlier. The casket was supposed to be closed. I had sealed it myself. I knew I had, but now it was open. My body locked. My lungs refused to fill. I took 1 step forward, then stopped. I didn't want to see what was inside. I didn't want to find out whether the body had shifted, or worse, whether it wasn't the body I expected. I don't remember how I got to my car. I just remember the sensation of the cold air hitting my face as I yanked the driver's door open, fumbled the keys, and sped out of the parking lot like something was chasing me. I parked on the street 2 blocks away and sat there, engine running, lights off, heart hammering. Eventually, I pulled out my phone and accessed the funeral home's live security feed. I rewound the footage to about 11:30. There I was on the grainy screen, walking toward the door, turning off lights, putting on my coat. Then, on the table across the room, the casket lid slowly began to lift. No jerking, no sudden movement, just a slow, deliberate motion like someone was pushing it open from the inside. But there was no one, no figure, no face, just the lid rising and then nothing. No footsteps, no one exiting the casket. Just stillness. Then me. Running out of frame, I quit the next morning. Didn't call. Didn't leave a note. I packed my locker, left my keys on the desk, and walked away. The owner tried calling me a few times, but I never picked up. What could I say? Hey, sorry I left so abruptly. Your casket opened itself, and a man I never let in keeps showing up in reflections. No, I didn't even tell my family. I just told them I needed a break, and that was the end of it. Or so I thought. Sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet and the house settles in strange ways, I feel it again. That presence. Like someone is behind me, watching, waiting. I don't turn around anymore. I don't want to see what might be there. And if you've ever worked in a place where the dead are supposed to rest, let me give you one piece of advice. Don't ignore the ones that don't. After Charlene's story, I couldn't sleep for days. There was something about the way she described him, just standing there, that haunted me. I kept thinking about that reflection, that casket, the lock clicking open when no one else was there. You expect the dead to be still, but when they aren't, that's the kind of thing that makes you start watching shadows like they mean something. Her story rattled me more than I expected. It made me wonder how many others out there have gone through something similar and never told a soul. That's how I found Dr. Mateo Alvarado. He didn't post his story online. He didn't write a blog or give an interview, but but I knew a nurse who used to work with him, and when I mentioned I was collecting night shift stories, she got quiet, said, "You should talk to Mateo if he's willing." Turns out he was, eventually. And when he told me what happened to him outside that hospital in Nevada, I realized something that still gives me chills. Some nightmares don't come from the dead. Some wear uniforms, smile, and wait for you in the dark. My name is Mateo Alvarado. I'm 41 years old, a trauma physician with 15 years in emergency medicine, and for the longest time, I prided myself on staying calm under pressure. I've handled everything from cardiac arrests to mass casualty traumas. I've pronounced death more times than I can count. But nothing prepared me for what happened one winter night 2 years ago. It was February, cold and dry, the kind of night where the desert wind whistles low across empty parking lots. I had just wrapped up a 12-hour shift at Valley Ridge Medical Center, one of the busiest ERs in southern Nevada. It was 2:30 a.m., and I was running on nothing but caffeine and adrenaline. You know that post-shift days, where your legs feel like rubber and your brain's still half in the trauma bay? That's where I was. I grabbed my bag, threw on my jacket, and started toward the elevators that led to the staff lot. The hospital was quiet, the kind of quiet that's heavy. The only sounds were the occasional beep from a monitor, a distant squeak of a janitor's cart, and the hum of the fluorescent lights above. When I reached the elevator bay, a security guard was already waiting there. He was tall, average build, maybe mid-40s, wearing the standard Navy uniform with the hospital's security patch on the sleeve. He gave me a friendly nod. "Heading to the lot?" he asked. His voice was casual, like he knew me. "Yeah," I said. "Dead on my feet," he chuckled. "They're blocking off the main lot for maintenance tonight, pipes or something. You'll have to use the side exit." I paused. That was the first red flag. I'd been working at this hospital for 5 years. We didn't do maintenance at 2:30 in the morning, not without notice, and I hadn't seen any emails, no signs, nothing. "Weird," I said carefully. "Didn't hear anything about that." He hesitated, just for a second, then nodded. "Yeah, last minute, burst pipe or something, safer this way." He gestured toward the side hallway. That hesitation, it stuck with me, subtle but there. And then I noticed something else. His badge looked too new, too clean, no scratches, no scuffs, like it had been pulled out of a package that day, and he wasn't wearing a radio. Every real security guard carried one. Shoulder strap, clipped mic, the whole deal. His shoulder was empty. I should have turned around right then, but I was exhausted. My brain wasn't firing on all cylinders, and honestly, you don't expect bad things to happen inside a hospital. It's supposed to be safe, so I followed him. The side hallway was dim, quieter than usual. No nurses, no janitors, no movement. Just us and the sound of our footsteps. As we walked, I felt the back of my neck tighten. Something about the silence was wrong, unnatural. I glanced at my phone. 3% battery. Perfect. I gripped my keys tighter. The hallway ended at the side exit, a metal door that led to the employee loading zone. Beyond the door was a stretch of pavement, a flickering light post, and a single dark gray van parked just past the loading dock. Engine running, back doors open wide, waiting. Not like someone had just unloaded something, more like someone was about to load me. I stopped walking. "Actually," I said, forcing a laugh, "I think I'll just head back and check the main lot. Worst case, I'll circle around." He turned toward me. His face stayed neutral, but something in his eyes shifted. "It's blocked," he said, stepping slightly toward me. "This is faster." I stepped back. He stepped forward. And that's when I heard it. A voice from behind. "Hey, who are you talking to?" I turned fast, heart leaping. Down the hallway stood another security guard, one I recognized. Brian, real guy, real uniform. Radio strapped across his chest. My head snapped back to the man in front of me, but he was already moving, calm, controlled, walking quickly toward the van, not running, not panicked, just leaving. The back doors slammed shut. The van pulled off with no hesitation, no screeching tires, just a smooth, practiced exit. Brian jogged up beside me, eyes wide. "Who the hell was that?" I couldn't speak, not at first. My mouth worked, but the words wouldn't come. I finally managed, He He said the lot was closed, said I had to use the side exit. Brian's face went pale. We didn't close anything. I've been on shift all night. No work orders, no reports. I followed him back to the security office, legs shaking. They pulled the footage. There I was, walking down the hall with the man just ahead of me, clear as day. The camera outside the exit caught him walking toward the van. We handed the footage over to the police. They ran his face. 3 days later, I got a call. The man was identified, a wanted criminal with priors in multiple states: assault, kidnapping, human trafficking. He'd been off the radar for over a year. By the time they traced the van, it was gone. No license plate, no trace. Just like that, he vanished again. I switched to the day shift immediately, refused to park alone, refused to walk anywhere without backup. I told myself it was over, that I was lucky, that I got away. But 2 months later, while driving home from a conference late at night, I saw it. That same van, parked on the shoulder of the highway. Engine off, headlights dark, no driver, just sitting there, waiting. I kept driving, didn't slow down, didn't look back. I still don't know if it was him. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe I was just seeing things. But here's what I do know. If Brian hadn't walked down that hallway when he did, if I'd taken just a few more steps toward that van, I wouldn't be here telling you this story. And if you're reading this, if you work late shifts or walk to your car in the dark, don't ignore your instincts. Don't assume the badge means safety, because sometimes the real danger wears a uniform and waits for you in the silence, knowing that no one's around to hear you scream. After I spoke with Dr. Alvarado, I started parking in front of my apartment instead of behind it. I stopped using the same coffee shop each morning. I even switched the side of the bed I slept on, like somehow that would make me harder to track. Paranoid? Maybe. But Mateo's story reminded me that not all monsters hide in closets or graveyards. Some have driver's licenses and clipboards. Some walk you to your death with a nod and a smile. I thought I'd heard the worst. I thought nothing else would surprise me. Then I heard from Shane Dobbins. It was a random message, short, no context. Just, I worked nights at a gas station and something tried to take me. That was it. But I responded, and what he told me over the phone was the kind of story that sinks into your bones. You don't need the supernatural when people themselves are willing to become the darkness. My name is Shane Dobbins. I'm 23 now, but this happened when I was 21. Back then, I was working nights at a gas station off Highway 287 in Wyoming, about 40 miles from the nearest town. It was one of those places you only find because your GPS fails and your fuel light comes on at the same time. Open 24/7, middle of nowhere, surrounded by nothing but dark stretches of highway, flat land, and the occasional rabbit darting across the lot. Most nights were so quiet you could hear the wind whistle through the cracks in the glass. We got truckers, locals, a few night owls, but rarely anyone after 1 a.m. That night, it was just after 1:30. I remember because I was halfway through a reheated burrito and watching some low-budget true crime show on the dusty screen behind the register. The station was dead silent, no cars, no foot traffic, just me, some flickering fluorescent lights, and that constant background hum of loneliness that comes with working graveyard shifts. Then I heard it, the low, steady rumble of a truck pulling into the lot. I looked up at the monitor connected to the outside camera. A pickup had stopped at pump 4. No headlights, no movement, just idling. I waited. People don't usually linger when they need gas this late. They pull in, fill up, pay, and go. But this one just sat there. 1 minute, then 2, then 5. No door opened, no one stepped out, just that engine running, soft and steady, like a lullaby turned sinister. I leaned toward the glass, trying to catch a glimpse beyond the camera angle, but from the counter, I couldn't see much. Maybe the driver fell asleep, I thought. Maybe drunk. Or maybe just figuring out directions. Still, something didn't sit right. There was a stillness about the truck, the kind that feels deliberate. Curiosity, or maybe stupidity, got the better of me. I stepped outside, hoodie pulled tight against the chill. The cold Wyoming wind slapped me across the face, but it was the silence that got me. No music, no voices, just the soft idle of the engine and the crunch of gravel under my boots. "Hey, you good out there?" I called, trying to sound casual. No response. I took a step forward. The driver's face was just barely visible, backlit in the shadows of the cab. He was staring straight ahead, not moving, not blinking, just sitting there. It felt wrong. I can't explain it. People don't sit that still, not even corpses. Then something moved. Not in the truck, but near the dumpsters just off to the side of the lot where the lights didn't quite reach. I squinted. At first I thought it was a plastic bag caught on the wind, but then it moved again, low, fast, too deliberate. I stepped back, and that's when I saw them. Two men, crouched behind the dumpsters. One of them started moving, not toward the store, toward me, fast, not running, not yelling, just charging. I turned and bolted. My legs nearly gave out under me as I reached the door. I slammed it shut, locked it, hit the alarm switch. A split second later, something hit the glass, hard. I stumbled backward, heart punching at my chest. On the monitor, I saw both men now standing. One was tall, in a dark jacket, staring at the door with a grin that chilled my bones. The other was already heading back to the truck. That truck, the one that hadn't moved, hadn't responded. The driver hadn't even flinched during the entire thing, like he was waiting or watching or both. The man in the jacket reached out and tapped on the glass lightly, like he was knocking on a neighbor's door. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away, climbed back into the truck. The engine revved and they pulled out slowly. Not in a hurry, not peeling off, just easing back onto the road like they had all the time in the world. I didn't call the cops. What would I even say? A couple guys stood outside and looked creepy. There was no real crime, no footage clear enough to do anything with, just a feeling I couldn't shake. I told myself maybe they were drunk, maybe it was a prank, but something in my gut said otherwise. Something in me knew that if I'd stepped even a few feet further out into that dark, open lot, I wouldn't have made it back inside. That should have been it, but it wasn't. The next night at exactly 1:30, the truck came back. Same model, same color, same pump. I didn't go outside this time. I watched from the monitor, frozen. The cab was dark, no one moved. But then the store phone rang. That dusty, half-broken landline no one ever used. The caller ID flashed. Unknown. I picked it up. "Quickfill station, this is Shane." Silence. Then a man's voice, calm, slow, cold. "Why didn't you come outside this time?" Click, line went dead. When I looked back at the monitor, the truck was gone. Not driving off, not turning around, just gone. I called my boss the next morning and told him I quit. Didn't give a reason, just said I was done. I packed up and moved back in with my brother in Cheyenne for a few months. Tried to shake it off. Tried to convince myself it wasn't as bad as it felt. But I knew. Deep down, I knew. That first night, I wasn't supposed to see them. I was supposed to step a little farther from the door, a little deeper into the shadows, and once I did, that truck wasn't going to stay parked. It was going to leave with me in it. I never saw that truck again, but sometimes when I drive past a rest stop late at night or pull into an empty gas station on a road trip, I feel it again. That tightness in my chest, that sense that something's watching from just beyond the light. And I remember that voice on the phone, calm, patient, like a man who doesn't mind waiting, because he knows you'll come outside eventually. When I started collecting night shift stories, I thought I was just chasing eerie encounters, ghosts in funeral homes, strange figures in parking lots, shadows that moved when they shouldn't. But what I found was something far more chilling than just fear of the dark. I found patterns, people, ordinary, hard-working people who became vulnerable simply because they were alone, predictable or too trusting, and the scariest part, none of them ever thought it could happen to them, until it did. Lucas's story taught me that routines can be dangerous when someone with the wrong intentions starts watching. The smallest habits, a break at the same time, A favorite parking spot can become breadcrumbs for someone hunting in silence. His experience reminded me how important it is to stay unpredictable, to never assume no one is paying attention. Charlene's story was different, but just as haunting. It reminded us that some jobs force us into the quietest corners of the world, places where the veil between life and death feels a little too thin. Her story wasn't just about fear, it was about presence, that unexplained, heavy feeling that you are not as alone as you think. Her silence after quitting told me everything I needed to know. Some truths are too strange to explain. Then came Mateo. His story wasn't supernatural, it was terrifying because it was real. A fake uniform, a friendly face, a rehearsed lie. It took one wrong step for him to almost become another name on a missing persons list. What saved him wasn't luck, it was awareness. That slight hesitation, that gut feeling, it matters. Listen to it, it could save your life. And finally, Shane. His story was the simplest, and possibly the most horrifying. There were no ghosts, no words exchanged, just a truck, two men in the shadows, and a plan. If he had walked just a little further, if he had hesitated even once, we might never have heard from him again. The danger wasn't in what they did, it was in what they were waiting to do. So, here's what I've learned and what I want you to take away from these stories. If you work nights, stay alert, change your routine, trust your instincts. Don't second guess that uneasy feeling just because it's probably nothing, because sometimes it's definitely something. Whether it's a stranger watching from the lot, a voice that knows your name, or a shadow that shouldn't be there. Your safety always comes first. Thank you for spending your time with me here on Enigma of the Unknown. Your support means the world, and it's what keeps stories like these coming to light. If you've ever had a late night encounter that made your skin crawl, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. You never know who it might help. Until next time, stay safe, stay sharp, and remember, some things wait in the dark, hoping you won't notice.